Not too long ago, the team at the International Center for Clinical Excellence announced the development of a new statistical indice. It was called the Success Probability Index, or the SPI. For us, it was the culmination of 2 decades worth of dedicated work and data collection. And as I said in the video and my email at the time, it was also the fulfillment of a dream. Up to this particular point, all we had were static predictors. The SPI, by contrast, was dynamic. It had a memory. It updated at each session, looking at the combination of the SRS and ORS scores and helping us determine the likelihood of success for this particular client by the end of treatment. To understand the SPI, it can be useful to go back in time to look at the history of attempts to provide feedback that would help them make small adjustments along the way to improve engagement and the probability of a successful outcome. In the beginning, all we had were the measures, the ORS and the SRS, and we were simply advising that people reviewed them together with their client. It was an advance, certainly, over basing such judgments solely on our clinical judgment. In time, with the gathering of data, we were able to use a statistical formula developed by outcome researchers to indicate, well, exactly how much change, how many change in points, for example, on the ORS, did it take to know that whatever progress the client was making was actually due to the treatment being offered, not due to chance, the passage of time, or error of measurement. Having that figure and this little graphic allowed us at any given session to determine whether or not the client was making progress. Using the RCI in this fashion was somewhat of an advance. Unfortunately, the RCI tended to overestimate the amount of change necessary for clients who were already functioning fairly well and underestimate it for those clients who were doing much more poorly. We continued to work. We were hoping we'd be able to find some way of determining how people changed along the way so that we would know whether they were on track or off track for that individual client. And so came the expected treatment response trajectories. You're likely going to remember these. Most outcome systems continue to rely on a very similar logic. What was it? Percentile rankings. We had a very large database, and we simply compared the client's progress over time to the 50th, 25th, and 75th percentile, combined with the RCI, comparing the client's score to these percentile rankings of people with similar scores did give us a slightly better idea. What it didn't tell us was whether or not the person, that specific person, was on track for success by the end of treatment. Like you, we were aware that clients' progress paths over the course of treatment were unique, highly idiosyncratic. And so comparison to percentile rankings really didn't tell us much about whether or not this particular client's path would ultimately result in a successful outcome. But how would we know that? And in order to determine this, an entirely new logic was required. That logic is represented in the treatment response trajectories. If you're using any one of the 3 authorized outcome management systems, you enter the client's outcome score and you see a red, yellow, and green zone. The green zone is the least amount of change, regardless of the client's individual pathway, that is associated with change at the end of treatment. Thus, regardless of the particulars, as long as the client's scores fell above that green line, they were likely to end successfully. Similarly, the red zone, This was the most amount of change a client could make given their first session score and still be off track, regardless of the individual's pathway through treatment. The three authorized outcome management systems using the ORS and SRS are the only systems available that use this predictive logic. And it is a good predictor, but we still weren't satisfied because we knew that what happened at each session impacted the likelihood of success at the end. Clients and therapists aren't like rats in a Skinner box. They adjust, move, and change based on what's happening at the moment. We needed to be able to take into account not just the first session score, but all of the work that was being done right up to the present session. In the next Fit Tip video, I describe the work involved in developing the Success Probability Index, as well as provide some hints and ideas about how to integrate that into ongoing clinical work.